Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunch for the Soul. We're doing it differently today. If you've joined my live stream before, you know that I usually have my lovely people in a different place today. They are in the house here at our Fox 26 studios because I got to interview them live on Fox, and we wanted to share them with you again in case you missed our broadcast. So please welcome Ty and his lovely wife, Crystal Gibson. Welcome to Lunch for the Soul.
Thanks for having us.
Ty, you have the most incredible story to share of survival. And I want people to know because diabetes is so prevalent. We're talking Diabetes Awareness Month, so it's an important time to talk about it. Make sure you know the warning signs. We're going to bring in your doctor in just a little while. But let's start with your journey because you have quite an unbelievable one, starting when you were a child. How were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old. And I lived about 2 hours outside of Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really an interesting time. Obviously, and this was in the 70s, and the technology was not there that's here today, right? So it was very early on in some of the diabetic advances that they have now. But the thing was I just went through some times where I was a very active kid, and then all of a sudden I just started losing all my energy and just the dryness of the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I remember correctly, the night my mom woke up and I had drank a whole gallon of water out of a jug, and when she woke up, it was all gone, and she knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
So they got me to a doctor, and they diagnosed me there as a diabetic. For 2 years, it was a very challenging up and downs, and they could never really control my diabetes. I was taking shots, and I went to the diabetic camps the Lions camps back in the day where you could learn how to give yourself shots. And so at 8 years old, I was giving myself insulin shots, sometimes up to 6, 7, 8 shots a day.
Gosh, so much.
So it was just a really uncontrollable run for me. And then in late 70s, 79, came to Texas Children because they were coming out with an insulin pump. And it was Dr. Leighton Hill who was the doctor that put me on an insulin pump, and it was 2 pounds. This thing looked like a brick.
Oh my goodness.
And it was
it's something you had to carry around, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Right?
I wasn't very young. I was a very little guy. So I had this big brick basically on my belt, but it was really a good change for me.
Yeah,
but
it gave you some freedom, right? Even though it was heavy. Yeah.
But I mean, when I got in there, it was 3 months.
Yeah.
I was in the hospital basically, just trying to regulate this thing because I was one of the first ones to get a pump. I mean, it was still early on in those days, insulin pump at all, because I think this was used for chemotherapy, actually, the pump that I had. So anyway, got through that. And then over the years, I wore different size pumps. They started getting smaller, the technology, and they got down to a much smaller one. And then through my college days, I went back on shots, which was really interesting because at the time the doctor was like, hey, maybe it was a change. We could try it. And we tried it for a couple of years, and that worked. And then when I turned 30, I started having kidney problems. And that is where really it started getting into some really serious effects. My kidneys failed. So and at the time, there was not really anybody doing dual transplants. So one of my doctors came out and said, hey, what about a kidney pancreas transplant? Well, the only doctor at the time that was doing a dual transplant was in Dr. Bartlett in the University of Maryland out in Baltimore. So we went up there, we met with him. He said, we were a perfect client for this. Again, I think I was, God put me on this earth to be research for diabetes because it was an early on dual transplant. It was early on. It was something that was just starting to happen. So I had the transplant. I had a kidney pancreas. And that alone there's a cool story between all that and the way, God played roles in that. I mean, getting the call at midnight and saying you got to be in Baltimore in 4 hours, and I'm in Austin, Texas, and my mother, who I was getting her kidney, was down in Beaumont, Texas. So bringing all that together, we got on a plane, we got to Baltimore, rushed through, got the transplant. The transplant went amazing. It was a great transplant, and then so I got through that, and the transplant went well. 12 years, so I had a pancreas, which I used to tell people I don't have diabetes anymore. They said that's not true. There's no cure for it. So anyway, so I got through that, and then I had the kidney for another 20. And then my wife, who stepped up, who I'm so glad that
now
she's here.
We bring in the lovely
the
wife,
star.
everybody.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. So how scary to not know if you can find a match. And this match was just right beside you all the time. How did you find out that you were the match?
Well, it's interesting because I always thought I knew my blood type. I don't know if I had made it up in my head that I was an A positive. So because I was an A plus, I guess I made it up at some point. And he is not. He's an O, so he can only receive O. Mm-hmm. So we went through. We had done dialysis, I guess, since May to about October. That wasn't a great road for us. It was excruciatingly painful to watch someone you love go through that, especially at a young age. I mean, I consider us still young, and we've got a lot to go. We had a young child still at home. Mm-hmm. So I decided, I had made the decision. We talked about it, said that we're going to go see if I can do a paired match, because I'm not the right blood type. Mm-hmm. So we started the process at Houston Methodist to see if I was qualified. I went through round 1 of testing, came back for day 2, and they said, I said, so tell me more about this paired match. My mother was with me. She was, concerned and interested also in how this worked. And they said, well, why do you think you need to give a paired match? You don't want to just give directly to him. And I said, well, I can't. I'm not the right blood type. And she said, well, honey, who told you that? You're an exact match. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, God changed my blood type. He changed my blood type. And everyone thinks I'm joking, and it's just a funny thing to the story. But I really, really, my whole life thought I was an A positive. So they continued with the testing, and really everything was a godsend. They didn't want to scare us and tell us, there's possibilities that, the antibodies and antigens might not react right. As a donor and a recipient, and you're married, there's a lot of emotions involved. Oh, yeah. And so, they try to manage those emotions, and your hopes are so high. But I'm telling you, the fact that my blood type was an exact match, I was already convinced this is what's supposed to happen, and this is going to be perfect.
So it sounds like you didn't even have to take this quiet time of prayer or anything to say, should I do this? You just knew you were the one, and you just did it.
I knew, we found each other later in life, and I knew that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. And wow. I also knew that God was walking alongside us the whole way. So I wasn't worried about that. Our prayerfulness and our prayer time came really through dialysis. Like, can you bridge us through this next step? Can you get us through to the finish line and where we need to be? And then, you have to consider, we have children. So both of us are going to go through this major surgery, and then what happens after? And so there's a whole faith that you have to have in order to take those risks and make those decisions. And for him as well, he struggled with, do I let my wife do this for me? Because, I don't want to risk her also. Sure. So it was a great experience. We did it on New Year's Eve, 2019, and it was a beautiful thing. So we had a great New Year's Eve celebration.
New Year in your hospital bed.
In the hospital bed. So that's right.
Hey, that's a nice way to start the year, though, for you to have a whole new lease on life. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us, Crystal. I may bring you back in a second. Right now, I'm going to get your doctor to come in, because we know you were talking about Houston Methodist and where you were. We know that they have such a great a history of positive incomes from transplant. Welcome. So I'm going to make sure we get your name all pulled up here so everybody knows who you are. So welcome, everybody. Thai specialist. We are so happy to have her with us today. We're talking about Dr. Achana Sadhu, an endocrinologist with Houston Methodist. And you want to make sure people take this seriously like Ty did. He did everything he could throughout his journey to make sure that he was healthy. Let's talk about some of those first warning signs. Like he said, as a child, his were thirst, fatigue. Type 2 diabetes looks different though, doesn't it?
Very different, very different. What Ty experienced is the classic signs of very, very high blood sugars that you wouldn't expect in a child to have. And his diabetes is type 1 diabetes, which is a autoimmune process. So it's something that is sometimes genetically transmitted, and then there may be some environmental factors as well, but something that the body is just doing on its own. Type 2 diabetes is really different, and unfortunately, it is much more prevalent. In fact, 10 times more prevalent than type 1. But it has a light around it, and that is we can know our risk for it. We can test and screen early, and then start making the changes to avoid all of the future complications. So knowing your risk, getting diagnosed, and even in the early stages called pre-diabetes is the key for that kind of diabetes.
Well, and it's important for everyone just to understand because it has gotten so prevalent. Let's talk about you and how far he's come. How proud are you of his case? Because it's a dramatic one. We're talking about 3 organ transplants because we didn't even get to talk that much about the pancreas.
Yeah. So Ty is a survivor, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. And it is my honor and pleasure to help him survive. But it really comes from within. Ty to continue to do everything that we ask him to do, that we know works. And then all of the medical and technological advances we've had that we can use to help Ty to continue to have a healthier and longer life.
We talk a lot about diabetes and that with type 2, a lot of times genetics play a role, certainly. A lot of times you can't prevent it with healthy lifestyle. What about type 1? Is there anything that parents can do to try to prevent it with kids, or is it if it's going to happen, it's going to happen?
Well, we're learning more and more about type 1. We're not definitely anywhere near the cure for it, but we are learning certain genetic risks that we can test for. And if you have family history of type 1, then you can test your children earlier. And see if they're at higher risk. And if there are, and actually there's a brand new drug that was just approved yesterday to help delay the onset of type 1 for kids who are at risk, and if you identify that.
Wow, how big of a role would that have played in your life? It's hard to even say, what a difference it could have made.
Absolutely.
But isn't it interesting with his case where he's been through so much and seen so many advances. And we've come a long way since you were a child. Do you feel like we'll continue that going up and continue to come up with these?
I'm very optimistic about the future of managing diabetes for those who are living with it. We are in an era of mushrooming drugs, mushrooming technology that's going to help all of the patients' lives easier on a daily basis, and then lives longer and healthier as well.
How important is it for people to make sure once they're diagnosed that they do whatever their doctor says to keep an eye on those sugars? It's hard to manage it. It is a roller coaster ride, as you well know.
Right.
Yes. So, I mean, this is what we know works. This has been tried and tested and proven in millions of people in many, many studies. So if we're telling a patient, here's what we need to do to keep you healthier, then it's on the patient. But education is empowerment for the patient, and a lot of patients just don't know it. So if you have the opportunity to get the health care you need and you're listening to your physician, you can be empowered to do those things that'll make you healthier.
Prevention is key for type 2. What can we do? I talked about those lifestyle changes, and everyone says, don't tell me to eat healthy and exercise. I've been told that my whole life. I'm not going to do it. But what can we do? Seriously, what does it take?
Okay, first, know in your family who might have had already diagnosed with diabetes, because that gives you your genetic history, that you're at higher risk. And then, and I can't say this strongly enough, from childhood, live healthier. And then in adulthood, it becomes easier to live healthier. I think a lot of patients that I get who are newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes have lived that way for decades of their life. And to tell them to overnight change everything, it's really, really difficult. We get that. So we do need to start within the family, within the individual at the youngest age as we can. And it's at that stage, not rocket science.
It's a lifestyle. Yeah. Yeah.
It's good choices.
Okay.
It's good choices.
I
Get
love
our
that.
kids to eat healthier, get our kids to be more active.
Mhm.
And the sad thing is now we're diagnosing type 2 in children.
Yeah.
Ty was diagnosed with type 1,
Mhm.
which had nothing to do with any of his
Mhm.
lifestyle choices. But we do have children with type 2.
Mhm. And that's lifestyle.
And they're going into young adulthood with complications like kidney failure.
Mhm.
I mean, imagine a 30-year-old on dialysis because they've had type 2
Yeah.
diabetes since they were 15.
With the kiddos, does that start with don't let obesity happen in the first place? Keep an eye on the weight of your
Yes,
children.
yes. So weight and diabetes type 2 go hand in hand. So when you're addressing one, you're addressing the other. Luckily, you get kill two birds with one stone, I say.
Right.
So doing those healthy lifestyles,
Mhm.
the fruits and vegetables as your natural
Yeah.
food products, lean meats, and limiting the calories for the day, and also being physically active. Those things just go a whole long way to prevent type 2.
You make it sound so easy, so we can do it. We're all in it together, okay? Thank you for coming in from Houston Methodist Hospital and talking to us and all the great things you're doing there. I'm going to bring Crystal back in because I have some fun family photos I want to walk through. I want everyone to meet your whole family, and then we will wrap here. But it's so neat, I think, for people to get a better idea. So walk us through this. Let's pull up some of these and see who we have here. We'll start with this one. Who's this little cutie patootie? Yeah, go ahead.
Now, this is our beautiful daughter. She her name's Reese, and she is just turned 12. We just had her big 12th birthday party.
Oh, how fun is that?
And then our oldest daughter, Morgan, and she is 29. She's in the Fort Worth Grapevine area, and so we're happy to have her with us. This is just some of our family photos getting together. We're extremely close to all of our family, extended and beyond, and so this has a picture of Ty's mother in it also. So our other
my first
other
kidney.
Your lifesaver
Yes.
right there.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
I always say, what do you do for the two on Mother's Day for the two women that have saved your life, right?
Santa baby, we gotta always get
Santa.
Santa
Right.
involved.
I
That's right.
surprised them with that one.
I love it.
Yes.
Well, it's so fun to see all of this and just to get a better idea what's going on here.
This is Morgan. Morgan ran a race at Disney,
How
and Ty
fun.
went up to join her to watch that. She started running marathons, and so that was where she. It was her first Disney race, and now she is, I think, going to continue those, and has already signed up for more in the spring.
Well, I tell you what, it's just an honor to have you here today. Thanks for sticking around and
yes.
talking more and just this awareness campaign. You never know. All it takes is one person to say, you know what? Maybe this is what it takes for me to change my lifestyle and to live a little bit healthier to prevent. You just
Right.
never know when you can make such a difference, and you never will.
Right.
But I know that you have the faith to know by sharing your word, and that's probably why you're speaking out in the first place, right?
Right.
Absolutely. It's like I said earlier, it's a very mean disease, but it's something that can be controlled. Again, stay in touch with your physician, and they will keep you on the right track. And I have not always, been the best at it, but I will tell you when I do, it's a much easier life, and it's a lifestyle that, I've been able to, get married, I have children, own our own business and all that with diabetes. And
had these strong women in your life, your
That's
mom
right.
and your lovely wife to help save your life. I
Yes.
love this partnership. You're obviously very loved, and I'm so happy you both healed and did so well. And here's to an incredible new year for you coming
That's
up.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you.
All right.
You.
Thanks for being here.
You bet.
And just a reminder to anyone, if you joined us late, you can hop on our YouTube page, Fox 26, and find us there. It's easy as can be. If you joined us late, you can go back and watch this or any of them in the past. Thanks for being here. If you have any ideas, reach out to me. I am always here for you, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Houston Methodist for helping us with this amazing story. Bye.